someone who was in charge of a child, and the child ends up dead. And as a mom of 3 adopted children that were abused and neglected by their father and mother, who were criminals, drug addicts, neglected and abused their children, and we got the 3 at one time, a 2, a 3, and a 5-year-old. I have no sympathy. I have no sympathy for people like that. I mean, call it mental illness. A lot of it is drug-related, criminality, whatever. It just boggles my mind that there are people that can do something to a defenseless child. And where do we draw the line? When do we start charging people with homicides instead of felony child abuse? Because they will not get, to me, enough of a sentence. They could be out in 5 years. I know as the defense attorneys, and love you guys, we need defense attorneys in this world, and we have to have defense attorneys. Everyone is entitled to their defense. But as speaking from me as a mom who's never had children, I can't fathom ever hurting a child, much less my own child. And believe me, I've had depression, and I've had anxiety, and I've had issues and things like that. But, you know, I just don't know. Is that are they born that way, or is it the drugs? I've chosen not to do drugs. I mean, I've chosen not to go the easy way out and tune out and drink and all that. That's my choice, my speech on that. And thank you all.
Thank you, Mary.
Yeah, Mary,
Alex, you want to weigh in?
Mary, I just want to say that people think defense attorneys like Bob or myself have become very hardened or something like that. Defense attorneys are absolutely horrified when they hear stories like this. When I get a case assigned to myself or I review cases by other attorneys and I see some egregious crime committed against a child, I mean, you want to vomit. I can't stand it. But, there's a lot of, you don't need a license to have children. You need a license to drive a car. You need a license. You need to be 21 years old to go buy a bottle of liquor, buy yourself a pack of cigarettes. You don't need any license to go and have children. Anybody can have children. And I know this is touching on in an area that no one's supposed to speak about. Because as soon as you speak about it and you say that, well, maybe not everybody should have children, you're accused of some form of, Nazism or something. But the reality is there are certain people in this world that are not capable and should be discouraged from having children. Because when they do, disaster strikes.
Yeah.
We know the signs in advance. But this is a subject you can't talk about in this politically correct world. It has to be shuffled off to the side.
Right. I noticed it wasn't brought up in the debates whatsoever, crimes against children.
No, nothing like that. But crimes against children, yes, certainly the government and the police and the general public need to be much more conscious about children that are in very vulnerable situations. Because if you can't protect our kids, and I've got 2 of them, if you can't protect your own kids, what's the purpose of society? What's the purpose of our country? We have to protect them. I'm with you on this one, Mary, and I know Bob's with you.
Thank you. I know you were, and I just want to, real quick say that I'm a Hispanic American. I came from Cuba. I know what it's like to live under communism, where you have no freedom, you have no rights, you have no representation. I came here as a young child, as a little girl. I appreciate the law here. I appreciate our country. I appreciate you guys being defense attorneys and protecting those that need defense. Everyone is entitled to a defense, because if not, we'd be living in a communist country or Nazi or something like that. So.
And we appreciate you, Mary.
Thank you.
Thanks for the call, Mary.
Absolutely. Thanks for the call. Okay, let's go out to Anaheim, California, and say hello to Sarah Kardashian. Hi, Sarah. How are you?
Hi, King, Alex, Joseph, and Mr. Bob Shalk. Very nice to meet you. I second everything that Mary said, and we talked about this a little bit last week. I wanted to ask two things about the baby in the creek, and we were talking about injuries that could occur while the baby was in the creek. I'm sure the baby will be x-rayed, Joseph, don't you think, for old fractures and old injuries versus new injuries from the creek. And also regarding the 11-year-old boy and his 16-year-old brother, what's the story on a man in the house? I know that the mom was home. Is there a dad in the picture? I'm sure the police officers are investigating everyone. But I'm just wondering if there is some connection to one of the parents, and this is you did this and we're going to do this to you. I'm just wondering if anybody has theory on that. And
yeah, go ahead, Sarah. Go ahead.
No, that's pretty much my two questions.
Yeah, as far as let's take the 5-month-old first. It's standard protocol for an infant's remains like this to be X-rayed from head to toe. They'll do what's referred to as AP and lateral. That means on the side and in a standard anatomical orientation where the child is both face and laterally. Then there will be specific X-rays that are done of all the aspects of the head. They'll look at the arms very, very closely, and radiographically, the forensic pathologist, as well as maybe a consulting radiologist, can go back and take a look at the limbs and the ribs, and to a certain degree the skull, and see if there's a pre-existing fracture. However, keep in mind, this is a 5-month-old child, so the bones are not as calcific as ours are as adults. I use that loosely because sometimes I'm referred to, it's stated that I'm not actually an adult. So, but anyway, the child's bones are a bit more malleable. So you might not have as desperate a fracture in a small child, but you can still have kind of torsion injuries that occur in child abuse cases. That's going to go to things like soft tissue injuries. That's one of the things I'll be very interested to see is if there are any kind of older underlying focal areas of hemorrhage involving the spine, the ribs, and the extremities, and the head to a certain degree as well.
And also they would be able to do tox. They would do tox screens, and they would also see whether the baby was malnourished or anything like that.
The malnourishment is not so much involved with any kind of laboratory studies as much as it is kind of visualization.
Right.
That'll be appreciated with the organs of the child, the general overall appearance after you kind of separate out all the trauma, whether it be antemortem or postmortem. And they're going to do microscopic studies on this child as well, where they're going to take, at autopsy, the medical examiner will take every representative organ system in the body and look at them under the microscope. That's one of the reasons at the ME's office, coroner's office, you can hold on to these tissue sections for years down the road for further review and analysis. So, they've got their work cut out for them, and it's kind of easy to disseminate between antemortem or prior to death and postmortem, which is after death injuries in a child like this or just about anybody. I hope that they take their time with this case and that they do a very thorough examination. And I have no doubt that they will. I know a few of these coroners over in this particular area, and it's served by this particular area is served by a very good forensic pathologist.
And for Alex and Bob, if I may, because we did touch on the subject of people that murder children, they tend to get light sentences as far as I'm concerned. And I know it's a horrible, horrible thing. People are going to just start screaming when I say this, but would there ever be any kind of measure to sterilize these people if they're going to get out in 5 years and they're still childbearing? And I'm talking about men too. Could they be forced to be sterilized?
Well, I can say that in some states we've covered cases in the past on various networks, and whether it be Nancy Grace's show or on CNN or Fox, wherever we've covered them, where there have been judges in the past who have attempted as part of plea conditions or police sentencing to forced sterilization. And obviously that's a very, very touchy subject because you're then dealing with people's liberties and people's bodies and whether or not that falls under the guise of the judiciary system. So, I mean, I see what you're saying. Again, I don't believe that should fall under the decision of a judge because, you could go in front of one judge who thinks it's a good thing and another judge who would not. So there's no consistency, which is, again, one of the issues, I think, with the criminal justice system in the sense of the consistency of the sentencing. And I know, a lot of times, people who aren't in the system every single day and don't see it, very rarely, and I know it seems that way because you see the one case of Casey Anthony, of someone who walks, someone who gets acquitted of a crime that, for the most part, if you asked 100 people who paid attention to that case, 99% of them are going to tell you that she did it, or 100 people are going to tell you that she did it. So she's the one that draws everybody. Right, exactly. But there's. But
even the ones that don't end up murdering their children, but severely abuse them, if they're only going to get 5 years, maybe the district attorney should say, "Look, we're going to give you 10 years, but if you get sterilized voluntarily, you can get out in 5." I just can't stand it anymore.
You're having someone play, for lack of a better term, God, or having someone play scientist, and this isn't. I just don't think that's something that should fall under the guise of the criminal justice system and judges and district attorneys. But again, I see your point. I know there have been attempts to do it in the past, but again, in today's day and age, I think it's less likely. But which is why I think, to another point you attempted to make, why states should potentially consider changing sentencing guidelines for people who abuse children, for people who are chronic abusers. And there's a point of time where you use the criminal justice system to rehabilitate, and there's a point of the system that's intended to punish. And there needs to be a better balancing of some of these crimes in some states don't require state prison sentences, don't require jail time. And if they did, I think you'd either see a bigger deterrent effect if people were seeing, jail time and harsher sentences for these types of crimes. But a lot of times it falls under the discretion of a judge, and these just aren't viewed in the same way as your burglaries, your homicides, your rape cases where people are going to jail for a long period of time.
Yeah, but Sarah, also, which is absolutely crazy as far as I'm concerned. Let's take New York, for example. If a parent, pokes his kid's eye out, as horrific as that is, maybe he's facing a Class C felony, which means he's facing up to 15 years in jail, right? If you sell a tiny grain of heroin for $1, you're facing 25 years in jail.
I don't get it myself. It doesn't make sense.
That you could
commit
really violence against somebody